From We Run With You, I'm Kathy Wynn.
And I'm Rob Alvarez. This is Doing Good. This season, we interview brain aneurysm survivors and caregivers to learn how they are navigating new challenges and finding their own way of doing good.
Finding out one person in your family has a brain aneurysm can be devastating. Imagine 5. Kerry Rice's sisters, Kate and Meg, survived ruptured brain aneurysms 6 years apart. Since then, 2 of her brothers and her mother have been successfully treated for unruptured aneurysms. Through all this, Kerry and her family have found the true meaning of strength and family and their own ways of doing good.
Hi, Kerry. Thank you so much for joining us today. She comes straight
Hi, Rob
to
and
us
Kathy.
from Connecticut. Slightly stranded for a day or two, but she is somewhere. She can join us. So we're very happy about that. So thank you, Kerry.
Yes, welcome to the show. Beautiful
Thank
backdrop,
you.
by the way, you have there.
Beautiful weather in Connecticut today.
Um, I think I know you have a very extraordinary story. I think you and your family. Um, and I think today's interview or episode is going to weave around and jump around quite a bit. But I wanted to start with maybe if you could tell us a little bit about your sister Meg. Maybe we'll start there, and then we'll
Yeah,
see
sure.
where we go.
I might actually have to back up even a little bit more because Meg
Oh,
is
okay.
the second sister in our family to have a brain aneurysm rupture.
Oh, wow.
So
Really? Okay.
in 2016, my sister Kate, who was 43 at the time, had a brain aneurysm rupture and survived. So she was in the ICU at Boston Medical Center for 6 weeks and was discharged like in physically in really good shape. What we really didn't know at the time was all the mental health things that can be under the surface,
Mm,
really, um, that really still battles with today.
Yeah.
So there, at that time, we really didn't know of the need to have others in the family screened because they sort of just thought it was kind of probably just rare and maybe a one-off kind of a thing. So 6 years later was last August in 2022 when we got the news about Meg suffering a brain aneurysm rupture as well. So a really similar, eerie, similar kind of story where it was like the phone calls and the texts going that she had been airlifted to Boston Medical. Same staff that were there, many of the same staff that were there when Kate was there in 2016.
wow.
So
So
what?
Meg's, go ahead.
Oh, just stepping back because I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Hmm.
Um, w- did Kate experience any symptoms or signs leading up to the rupture?
No, no.
Oh, wow.
She had had some other health kinds of things with like clotting disorders, but a blood clotting disorder, but nothing that they say was any connection at all to the rupture.
Uh, so I guess fast forward. So how many years after? So 6 years
6 years.
after. Um,
Yes.
that's when you. So was it again kind of out of the blue? No
Yes.
symptoms.
Meg was at, she has 4 boys, 4 young boys, and she was at a hockey practice with 2 of them and just had a, horrific headache and, um, you know, passed out there. So the friend that she was with called the ambulance and they rushed her to a nearby hospital and then she was airlifted to Boston shortly after.
Oh, wow. So were you able to be with her pretty soon after? Or can you tell us about that
Uh,
experience?
Sure. Yeah, I was. I was actually at the Cape. We do spend a lot of, July and August at Cape Cod. So I was closer to Boston than, I would have been had I been in Connecticut. Well, I was living in Connecticut when Kate had her rupture. So it was like, a little more difficult for that, the travel time. But anyway, it happened on a Monday for Meg and I was able to go see her Wednesday morning. So Tuesday was, really, she got to the hospital about almost midnight Monday, and they
Mhm.
gave her a 10% chance of survival,
Oh,
and
my goodness.
just worked. all night, overnight, and Tuesday with some procedures and surgeries and all of that. So I was able to see her on Wednesday morning for the first time.
Uh, So how was recovery for her? Um,
Yeah, it's really like the two totally different tales in a way, because Kate
hmm,
never had the tubes, never was on a ventilator. Just it was just such a different um, manifestation, really,
wow.
from Meg. You know, physically speaking. So yeah, Meg was on a ventilator, and she had kind of forgetting all the details of like the names of the procedures, but it was a left pica aneurysm rupture, which I know Kathy is
I
similar
believe
or the
yes,
same.
I had
Yeah,
the same. Mhm.
yep. She had,
Unfortunately.
yep, she had 3 strokes pretty soon after the rupture,
Oh,
and so they just were constantly checking her, constantly monitoring her, one-to-one nursing, and really I was there when I got there that Wednesday. She did open her eyes, and her husband and I were there at the bedside, and we were just so relieved, to see her awake. So from there, it was just like baby steps, and the way her husband, his name is Walter, described it is like what they told him would be like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and we
Hmm.
totally lived that for like about 6 weeks, where you just have
Oh,
this
wow.
amazing news, and then maybe like, oh, they didn't like what they saw in the latest scan, or they were putting medicine in through like a catheter in her neck, but then the vasospasms were at such a rate that was you know dangerous, that they were actually having to do procedures to go put the medicine in directly at the site. So like that, that kind of thing would happen
Mhm.
really pretty frequently for those first, like, pretty much 6 weeks.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that it was her left pica that had ruptured. How did they end
Yes.
up treating it, or corrected?
um
Was
I
it through like
want to say.
a by I had a bypass. I was c I'm 'cause that's all I know when you have a left, when you're dealing with the pica. I was just curious,
Hmm.
was, Meg's in any form, was it like the the typical aneurysm, which is a balloon, or was it a fusiform?
It was fusiform, so I feel like there was some
Mhm,
kind of adhesive involved. I know, I remember reading about your pica bypass, like that
mhm.
incredible, fascinating story. It definitely wasn't anything like that. So I think it
Oh,
was. I mean, I don't know if adhesive is even the right word, but
okay.
yes, it was fusiform. Hmm.
Okay. And then the other, and I hope I'm not gonna bring too much tears, because I just thinking about it already, it's going to, um, get me emotional, because as you know, I have twins, and when it happened to me, I had I collapsed. I didn't know anything, but my children were there. I think they saw it. And as Rob mentioned to me much later on, he did not tell them exactly what happened, which they were actually quite upset. So you had mentioned that it happened during practice,
Hmm.
the boys' practice. Did they did they see it? How did they react? And was was the magnitude of what Meg was going through given to them at all?
They didn't see it, because the 2 boys were on the ice at the time. So that was really something that Walter had to kind of manage. And I think he just gave them the information they needed to know at that
Mhm.
moment, which was, mom wasn't feeling well. So, they took her to the hospital. And so they actually were supposed to be at the Cape the next week. So we just kind of as a family rallied around to make that happen for the boys. So they
Mhm.
just came in, stayed with us. But it was weeks and weeks before they were able to go and see her. They were, at the time, I'm going to say 12, 10, 9, and 8. So like pretty young. I mean, you know how frightening it is to see someone like that.
Mhm.
I was an adult and I had a huge reaction to seeing Meg like that. So it really wasn't something that their dad felt like would be um, helpful for the boys to
Mhm.
see at that time. So I think he just really gave them sort of the information that they needed.
So what would you say was the toughest part of at least those beginning days or weeks for you and your family? And what was the most, I guess, helpful, or what gave you the most comfort during that time?
Uh, I really think the hardest part was just that moment to moment, just walking such a thin line of really knowing that she really wasn't out of the woods for a very long period of time. So it just really kind of consumes you with the what could happen, even with those like little steps, and then any kind of backslide would send us all kind of reeling. We're a very large family, and so we did we're close anyway, but this definitely had everybody on board. I'm one of nine, and Meg's husband is one of 10 kids. So there was so much support with just jumping in and helping with whatever was needed. So I think that was really probably the most powerful part to see. And
Yeah.
Walter started it was the Caring Bridge website, and
Mhm.
he did these daily updates that I think were cathartic for him, probably, but just so
Mm.
helpful for keeping others posted who weren't as close to the situation, either geographically or just in general, not immediate family who was getting constant texts. So it's really really awesome to think back to those posts and to see how there was like that little bit of growth, and he wove humor in very often, which was great for people, I think, to react to.
That's crazy. You are one of 9. I am also one of 9. I'm the youngest of 9. And
Oh,
I can yeah.
you're the
And I can
youngest. Okay.
certainly I can certainly relate and understand that well, while I'm deep asleep for, like, a whole week during what happened, I was told,
Yeah.
and also, you know, it was great that my niece ended up documenting all this, and I had asked her, I said,
Mhm.
"Why would you even I mean, what even gave you the courage to take a photo of me, like, hooked up with all these wires um and she's like, "Well, I because I knew you were gonna make it. I knew you wanted to see this." But I also,
Wow.
heard from everyone, later on that, because we came from I come from such a huge family. I had, like, what, 20 something nephews and nieces? I think it was quite a zoo, for the hospital staff to see in the waiting room. It was just like my family, so it was kinda crazy, but, I can certainly understand that, and that's great, that Meg had that as support, and Walter too, because my goodness, I always say I can only imagine because, again, I wasn't awake. I wasn't awake to see all of
Hmm.
this, and I can't imagine how um, frustrated you also must have felt because you're like, "Oh my gosh, like, first Kate, now Meg," and it was such a difference in terms of the condition that she was in. Um, but yeah, that must have been absolutely terrible to be in that
Mm.
state.
Yeah, I for one
Yes. Yep.
really can say that family support is really um was really helped me. And like Kathy said, we a lot of time our group took over the waiting room, and I think just having that distraction too, and I think I can relate to her husband. Maybe writing the communication and just being able to think of something else besides um, what his wife is going through. So I think that definitely helps, and it's that strong family bond that you have is definitely helpful. Um, how I guess was most of the interaction with the doctors? Was it just with Walter? I think that's her husband's name, right? Walter.
Mhm.
Sorry.
No, yes, no, I actually, I thought the staff was amazing. So we would, it was 24-hour visitation. So Walter would get there really early, probably like about, he was there by 6 a.m. And then there was, they really were even a little bit loose, I think, at times on the number of people in the room, because my mom and dad went daily for the entire time that Meg was in the ICU. So whoever was there, I remember being there, and they'd do rounds anytime between 6:30 a.m. and sometimes it wasn't until 10:30 a.m. But they would turn and say, "Who are you?" and step over, and so they always included whoever was the extra person besides Walter in, and when they were giving their update, and I thought that was so important, really, to feel included and kind of part of the process.
So were there like throughout that point, were was it basically all right? Here's what we have to do, or were there any big decision points throughout her, her different treatments? Big decision points that either Walter or your family had to make for
Um,
Meg.
if I'm underst- if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think medically we just left it in their hands, and we just did that,
Mhm.
day by day, prayers every day of the small steps being celebrated. The bigger decisions, I think, were around things like, Meg's a kindergarten teacher, so
Mm.
with about 3 weeks before she was going to return to work, health insurance being in her name, and being on medical leave, like all of those things that really we had another sister who was instrumental in orchestrating all of that, because that was just way too much for Walter to even have to deal with at that moment. So I think of those kinds of things. And then even like the smaller things that people just stepped in and did, like, okay, let's get the kids all their back to school supplies that, I never would have been thinking of at that moment, or the laundry and the meals. So I think
Yeah.
some of the decisions, big and small, were equally important in a way.
So I guess fast forward a little bit to when um, she was able to go home. What was that transition like? Like for her, your
So
family.
yeah, so Meg went from ICU to step down unit, at Boston Medical, and then to Spalding rehab, um, not too far, just a little bit
Mm.
outside of Boston, um, for another probably 3 weeks. So I'd say all
Oh,
told, she didn't come home until, might have been the end of October, after the August rupture. So,
Oh,
Walter
wow.
was prepped on the things that were going to be needed at home, with regards to mobility and, safety. And then even really just helping kind of train the people who would be in the house with Meg. There were so many friends and family who were wanting to help, so that, Walter could be at work and the boys were at school. So someone to come over and cook a meal with Meg, and how that kind of looked in the beginning stages was, a lot of support for her, a lot of support with getting around the house, and, just being able to be safe there.
or what was the biggest help in that during that period for Walter or your family?
Yeah, we did a sign up Genius, and, Walter would
Ah,
say, like, okay, here are the hours that I need help with next week. And I would just blast it out to people, and they would sign up for a shift with Meg, or a shift with taking the boys to their sports, or appointments and things like that. That was hugely helpful for just Walter, just to be able to kind of look at the day and say,
Mm.
okay, this day is totally covered. We got this. And, any gaps that we needed to fill in, kind of a thing. So I think that looking back, I think that was super helpful.
That is really smart. Now, did you personally take any time off to be closer to Meg? Or I'm sure you wanted to, but were you able to at least?
No, I just did. I was at the Cape for the first couple of weeks, so that was like a sort of a hop, skip, and a jump, like a little over an hour
Mhm.
from where we are on the Cape into Boston Medical. So I did that several days, and my husband was so helpful with that because I was leaving him with my kids at the Cape, but also Meg's kids were with us. So there was a couple of days I left him with 7 kids, and
Oh,
I left at 5 a.m. to get to that 6 o'clock, that 6 o'clock entry at Boston Medical, and he was so good about that, just helping everybody, get themselves situated at the beach. So, but then, it was hard for me actually to come back. The day I left, knowing that I was coming back to Connecticut, was, I think I cried half the way home. So,
mhm.
but there's so many supports in place for Meg close to home. So I knew that she was in really good hands.
I don't know how I came across your page, but every time you would post something about Meg on stories, I get like so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Meg. That's what she looks like. And I think the most heartwarming picture of all was when you posted a picture of Meg and her 4 boys. It's like you could see the excitement and just that love like across the computer, just from that one picture. So I was
Mhm.
rooting for I
Yes.
still am for you guys.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. I was kind of on a mission after, and September is Brain Aneurysm Awareness Month. So I was looking up everything I possibly could from the time of Meg's rupture to, and then realizing in retrospect how much of this applied to Kate as well. So I was on the Brain Aneurysm Foundation Instagram, maybe the B Foundation, somewhere along the way. That's where I found your page
Mm, okay.
originally, and then messaged you because I couldn't believe it was a left pica.
In what way has this experience for both with your sister Kate and Meg changed your perspective?
When you talk about kind of the new normal, I was on a support group. Meg and I had logged on to one. The B Foundation was doing like a virtual support group. And somebody talked about kind of letting yourself grieve the loss of what was. And I could tell
Mhm.
that that really resonated with Meg because that really is true for the survivor. But I also think it's true for the family members as well. Um, but I just feel so grateful. She didn't go to the Cape last year. And she's there now, and like there's just so much. Kate's going there next week. So there's just so much to be grateful for. I find myself always looking for um, the gratitude in things.
Mhm.
And then logistically, more than that, is this screening piece where the work that you two are doing is incredible. And after Meg's rupture, her neuro team was like, everybody in the family needs to be screened. So for that like little 15-minute MRA screening, they discovered that my mother has 3 brain aneurysms, and 2 brothers were also found to have unruptured aneurysms, and all have been successfully treated with
Wow.
at Tufts Medical with Dr. Malik. So just that could have just changed everything, really, had we not gone through and done that. So that's really my message now is like, this is so preventable. It really is.
Mhm.
I mean, I know there's like roadblocks with insurance and having to validate to a physician that it's necessary, but it's so preventable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you are clear, correct, Carrie? I assume that you
Yes,
also
yes, yes.
went and got yourself checked out? Yeah.
Through one of the Brain Aneurysm Foundation webinars, I was linked up with this doctor in Canada who's doing like a genetic study. So he took saliva samples from, I think we got pretty much everybody covered in my family. And with just the
Mhm.
idea of like, looking at the genetic markers to figure out, why this is so prevalent in some families. Because really the doctors, once it happened to Meg, and they knew that was the second sibling, they weren't all that shocked that there was 3 more in addition to that, because it does, the numbers just really increase once you have that like second first degree family member affected. It really there's lots of studies out there about large families with a pretty high percentage of people with aneurysms. So the research is so critical, really.
I know our Kathy told me you are uh, doing a fundraising run for BAF. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then whether, you're, I know
Yeah,
Kathy's
sure.
dying to hear you're running.
It is, we run
um,
for goodness sake.
I've always, it is, we run with you. That's what I loved. I loved that connection too, Kathy. I did. I've been a runner for a long time. It was a lifetime ago, but I have a handful of marathons under my belt, and now I'm kind of pretty much at like the half marathon stage. I really like to do one or two of those a year. That's kind of my limit at this point. But and it's such a great race, and we'll already be there. Like it's just such an iconic race. I absolutely love it. I haven't done it in years actually, but so I'm really looking forward to doing it again, and also being able to wear that singlet with the BAF logo on it.
What I love is that, raising awareness is not just about, sharing your story, but it's the doing part. It's actually showing people that, I'm out here, with my sister Meg. I'm out here with another survivor, doing something that, I was not capable of, or I may not have been able to do because of what I went through. And I love the fact that, not only are you raising awareness, but you take action with your entire family. And gosh, like raising close to $25,000, that's wild. That's just so amazing that one single, and I'm going to say one single person because I know it's a group, but you were the one that you're running it, and you're the one that's kind of like leading the group. So I just have so much admiration. I commend you absolutely for doing all that you've done so far, with the walks and this race coming up. It's just so cool. I mean, I love what you're doing. You're doing good. You're doing good is what you're doing. So that's awesome, Carrie.
Thank you. And you too, you have such a great platform.
What do you think drives you to be so active?
I didn't really see another way. I guess that was just I guess I try and be like a fixer or problem solver, even if it's
Um,
something as simple as like that first day and Walter said, how do I get the word out to everybody about what's happening? Okay, we can fix that. And so this is something that I'm just passionate about because there are steps that people can take, and whether it's raising funds or sharing information, or I know B Foundation is doing a lot of great work in lobbying in DC, and BAF as well, to get more funding for research. So all of those things are just kind of the natural way to approach something rather than just sit idly by, I guess.
where do you think, or where are you hoping we will be as a, brain aneurysm community, or where we are as a society, um, in terms of how we look at or treat brain aneurysms, in 5 or 10 years from now?
I Big dreams, right? Would be like a blood test or some kind of genetic test, before this catastrophic thing happens. I think that would be amazing. And I do think the awareness is huge, and especially for which I'm discovering more and more. I saw this visual of like this Titanic iceberg looking picture, and it was like the things you can see a survivor going through, but then beneath the surface all of those things that are kind of hidden and invisible to other people. I think that's I have a real compassion for that, because there's so many people out there dealing with things that others can't see, so it doesn't, maybe that person doesn't look like they're struggling as much as they really are.
And I don't know how much you can share about your, either or both of your sisters' story of the mental part of that battle. What do you think we can learn from their experience that maybe you can share that others maybe that's going through the same thing can relate to, and feel like they're not going through it alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the support groups have been really great. They have them for survivors in particular. They have them for caregivers, because that is a whole, issue in and of itself, that is real and true in daily lives. I think just that everybody's going through something, and just to be compassionate and offer help wherever you can.
And how do you feel? Because I mean, do you feel like the lucky one? Do you feel guilty in a way too? Like, I don't know. I can just
Yeah.
there's just like everything
How do you
going.
process all
Yeah.
that, you know?
Like, why is this happening to like two of my sisters and two of
Hmm.
my brothers and my mom? And it's like I'm clear, you know?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to kind of unpack there, but I definitely think that the mental health piece, the invisible part, is so very important because there's trauma related to this, and that builds. And when you talk about reliving it, that's really what trauma is. Something happens or is talked about, and it's like you're back there again in that moment. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that with my loved ones in some ways. So I know how debilitating that really can be. So I think that's a key piece. We do try and use humor a lot in my family. We were like, there was a period of time there, right, when everybody was getting their screenings, and we were saying like we were calling it like this crazy game show called Another Day, Another Diagnosis, where we just didn't know. Like everybody was going to get their scans and say, "Wait, what? No." Again, kind of a thing. So, we definitely rely on humor in a lot of ways, to just stay even keeled, and I think that's another strength that we have as a family.
Is there anything in your family story that, you would say, okay, this is something that people, need to hear, and people can really learn from?
I do think, like sort of from the emotional standpoint and from the sort of more logical standpoint, I think from the research aspect is like, why, like what is it about these arteries that are weakened? I mean, really, that's what this is. So what's the cause of that? So I hope that there's an answer one day for that, more easily found for families. And then just the strength in the strength in family is really that you can overcome this, you can do it. And um, being able to see others going through it and kind of lift them up. And you probably feel this way, Kathy, but when I hear something about a story about a person who's passed away from a rupture, whatever the age, I mean, I feel like it's a lot of them in the news relatively recently, either athletes or celebrities. And I just am back there all over again with that feeling like, wow, we're so lucky to have two survivors in the family.
Yeah, I never. Oh my gosh, it just, you know what, Carrie, it you just hit me. You said I'm so lucky we have two survivors. That's wild. That's
It
so
is
crazy,
wild
right?
because you know the statistics. It's
Yeah.
it's they're
Yeah, you have
harrowing
to. Yeah,
stats.
I mean, I always tell people, don't ever. And I don't know. You could totally disagree, um, but I always tell my close friends or people that hear about my story. I always tell them, okay, do not tell, especially a brain aneurysm survivor, especially when you've just met them, that they are lucky because and it goes back to the invisible part,
Mhm, mhm,
because you don't know what they're going through. They may look
mhm,
very normal, meaning, active, no facial scars, no visible scars, but they may be living in 24 hours
mhm,
with, they may be living with 24 hours of pain, headaches. Headaches are invisible. Just paralyzed or numb from, the left side or right, whatever. It's all invisible pain. So, to listeners out there, do not tell other brain aneurysm survivors that they are the lucky ones, or they 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 were meant to be alive for a reason, because that
Mm.
negates everything in terms of, now you're putting pressure on us to have to do something like tremendous and
Yes.
extraordinary. Um, you know, just tell
Yep.
us we're glad you're here. We're glad you're still here, and
Hmm.
that will do.
So as we kind of bring this episode to a close, I do have one more question. But before we get to that, is there anything that you wanted to talk about? Any areas you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to
I, I
in
think
this conversation?
we covered everything. I might hear about this after if I missed anybody. But no, I think this was such a great experience for me. And I actually was thinking about it when I run. I don't use a watch. I don't use music or anything. I just run. I plan and I think. So I was thinking a little bit about what we might talk about today, but I didn't really have anything totally planned. So you two made it very easy to kind of tell the story. And it's a Kate and Meg's story is a great one to hear.
And if you would like to donate to Meg and Carrie's team, and I think you guys are called the Brainiacs, right?
Oh yeah. So that was a
Great name.
Yeah, that
5K
is.
we did.
Come
Yes.
on now, Carrie. Why could
Uh,
you? You gotta put a spotlight on
yes.
that.
So that was the team we did. Gosh, I think that was back in May or June. Might have been June. I forget. The Brain Aneurysm Foundation, yes, was doing a walk, their 5K that they do every year. So we did Team Brainiac, and we had a huge crew running that, walking that, the 5K at Castle Island in Boston. And then again, we linked up with the Brain Aneurysm Foundation for the Falmouth Road Race, but I don't think we have a clever team name for this. This is 10 runners. I don't know them all. I did mention the few that are connected to Kate and Meg, but there are some other people on the team that I'll meet the weekend of. So um, that
You can't use
is,
you can't use the same name. I totally use the same
I,
name.
I
The
know
10
I didn't.
Brainiacs. The 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 the, the 10 Brainiacs. Yeah, I don't know. I love it. I'd steal it.
Trademark that name.
Yeah, you better trademark that, Carrie, or I'm gonna steal it.
No, but my last question was: do you have any advice for any anyone going through this? Something similar, or families going through this.
um, it is 6 years ago, 7 years ago for Kate, and a year ago for Meg. It is still so fresh in my mind in so many ways. So I think I would just tell people just to, it's okay to feel whatever you feel. I mean, a song came on the radio today that just kind of brought me back to a moment that was really a tough one for us at this time last year. And it was, it's like it just happened in some ways. So feel the feels, I guess. It's okay.
Yeah.
Whatever your feelings are okay.
I love that. I love that. That is very important. I think that whatever you're feeling is valid, and I think
Yes.
you definitely need to feel it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today and here, sharing your story and your family's story with us. Hopefully we can do something together in the future. Maybe there's a run
The we run with you and
or
the Brainiacs. Yeah.
or
Oh my
something.
God.
We
Yeah.
gotta think of something. Like an East Coast thing. We do a lot in
Yeah.
California, but
Yeah.
we'll have to do
Okay.
something kind of on the East Coast
I think that's
for us
great.
here.
I'm here. I'm here. And I'm so happy that we connected way back when on Instagram, Kathy, and now to actually be able to chat with the two of you is
Yeah.
just
Don't
a
you just
great
love
experience.
technology?
I know. I know. It's so true. Brings people together. It really does.
Yes, and
Well,
keep doing what you're doing. Like Kathy said, you are doing good. So
you are definitely doing good. And please tell Meg
Yeah.
we are cheering for her, and we are totally cheering for you and the team at Falmouth Road Race. And I'm gonna take a vote. When we post this, I'm gonna have people take a vote to figure out what your team name should be. I am gonna say Team Brainiac. Just keep it and trademark it.
Okay.
Well, we will see you soon, and
Yes.
we will continue to follow Meg's progress and your team's progress. And thank you
Great.
again,
Thank
Kerry.
you both. Thank you so
All right.
much.
We Run With You is a nonprofit with a mission to improve the lives of people suffering from brain injury and disease by funding research, raising awareness, and providing support for survivors and their families. Find out more at werunwithyou.org. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a comment or review. Until next time, keep doing good.